Hi, everybody. Hi. Thanks for coming out tonight. I'm Tom Putnam, superintendent of Penfield, but I also always like to say I have two children in Penfield. They're both at Cobbles, fourth and fifth grade. And tonight is our 2018 Elementary Additions Project public information meeting. Just so you're aware of our agenda, because I know lots of people have lots of questions, so I'll give a little welcome in history. I'll turn it over to Vic Tomaselli and Gary Huffman from SEI Design, our architect firm, and Campus Construction, who will give you an overview of the project that we're talking about. We'll turn it over to Ed Primo, who will be talking about there is a land purchase and SEQR process, and give a little background of that, make sure that we inform the community to the best of our ability. Turn over to David Cruz, who will talk about our traffic study, which is part of our process of looking at any sort of capital project and what the impact could be. And then I'll turn it over to the one and only Dr. Mark Sansucci, our Deputy Superintendent for Business, who's going to talk about project budget and timeline, which is really important because although we're looking at the possibility of adding space and adding buildings to our district, we're always cognizant of the fiscal responsibility that we have to make sure that whatever we do is in the best long-term goals for the district. And then we'll do question and answers. We can do that here. So there may be questions you have that you think everybody wants to hear. And then also we'll sort of stop and we'll have principals and individuals at each of these site maps, especially like I'm a Cobbles parent, so I might have lots of questions about Cobbles and less questions about other schools. So we'll have that opportunity to speak with the building principal and all of us and do some Q&A about specific things at each of the maps. Does that sound good? Okay, thank you so much. Project background, if you're aware, we've talked a lot at our board meetings on a regular basis around increasing enrollment in the district. And we are one of the only districts that are continuing to see an increase. Many of the districts near us are either decreasing or staying flat. Penfield is continuing to see this increase. Really is growth in the district of new homes being built. The one that we probably all know is 5 Mile Line and Atlantic, which is Windsor Ridge, a Ryan home development. There's 86 homes going in there. I just want to mention that we started really talking about this project over a year ago, and we're ready to move forward until Shadow Pines came on the market, and originally Ryan Homes was looking to buy that and add 250 homes. We stepped back from this project because 250 new homes plus 86 at Windsor Ridge plus the other little pockets that are being built would mean not just new classrooms but potentially a new school. And so we really are at sort of this tough situation of making these decisions, but trying to do the best interest fiscally for the district. Ryan Homes can build, or I don't want to pick on Ryan, any home builder can build a home in about 4 months. It takes us, because we have to go through a very long process, you'll hear a bit tonight, it takes us about 4 years. We have to go through New York State instead of just going through the town like a home builder would have to do. More students means more buses, means more space. So the more students we have, it's not just classroom space, it potentially is cafeteria space, gymnasium space, and buses. Those big yellow buses and little yellow buses are all right now at 5 Mile Line. We know that site well, I'm sure. It's 4 acres, and we're ready to like stack buses like the rich-eyed dealers used to always say, you can't stack cars. Well, we can't stack buses. We're running out of room rapidly, and we know with more students coming in, we're going to need more buses. Overcrowding over there at transportation and B&G facility. I think we're really nice when we say aging facilities. So they were built in the early 60s, and if you've ever driven back there, Gina from transportation, Al McNiff from B&G are here, and it really is not a good spot to be. We really do need to look, and we have been looking for the easily last 10 years in terms of where else we could go. An opportunity came to us around a possible land purchase. So this project has changed. We did this very similar meeting in January 2017 right here, and since then you're going to notice things have changed, and I just want to share with you that what you see tonight is possibly going to change again because we have to work through New York State. Mark will talk to us about the budget. We do look at state aid ability, what we get from state aid to try to lessen the impact on local share, our taxpayers, and all those things come into play. So I'm really clear to say, whenever you look at these plans, this is our goal as of today, but things could change a little bit as we move forward in this project. Again, thank you very much for being here, and I'll turn it over to Vic and Gary to walk through a bit of the scope of the project. Sound good? All right. You want me to do this one, or is this? All right. All right, I'll do that. Before I turn it over to Vic and Gary, you can see how well we rehearse. Elementary classroom additions. So this is really what we're looking for now, is classroom additions to address really the overcrowding that we're starting to see in our elementary schools. So our plan that Vic and Gary will do a better job explaining is 4 classrooms at Scribner, 4 classrooms at Indian Landing, and 4 classrooms at Cobbles. At Scribner, we're also looking at additional gym and cafeteria space, as well as parking improvements. And then at Cobbles, we're looking at an additional small gym space, cafeteria expansions, and parking and parent traffic improvements. I can speak as a Cobbles parent very specifically to this one. Parent drop-off or student drop-off and student pickup is maybe just short of a nightmare. I'll save the word nightmare for Indian Landing. At Cobbles, it's just short of one. So part of this project you'll see is really trying to change that and make that flow of traffic easier for parents and safer for students. And then Indian Landing, 4 classrooms and a cafeteria expansion, bus loop and parent drop-off improvements, because Indian Landing being where it is on basically a main road, it gets very, very tricky. It's very small to try to drop off and pick off at Indian Landing. So that is our hope. And then I'll turn it over specifically to talk about site plans to Vic and Gary. You want one too?
Thank you, Dr. Putnam. I'm Vic Tomaselli. I'm an architect with SEI Design Group, and we have been working with the district for a very long time, but on this project, as Dr. Putnam said, for well over a year now. Try to run through these quickly, and it was also mentioned there are drawings around the room, and we can answer questions more specifically later. At Cobbles, the work on the exterior of the building includes improvements to both the bus loop stays the same, but parent drop-off and parking changes, and it allows entry into an area and some pretty good queuing space for cars to line up and do parent drop-off and then work their way out. It also involves extending a roadway, emergency access roadway for fire and rescue vehicles to access the remote parts of the building. The floor plan at Cobbles primarily stays the same. What we've looked at is basically adding on 4 classrooms to this wing, just extending the corridor, building 4 classrooms on this side of the building. On the other side, and you'll see that you'll note that we've said there's a 4 classroom addition at Cobbles. There's actually 2 other classrooms that are being added on, but we're taking existing classroom space within the existing building footprint and making it additional gymnasium fitness space. So there's a net gain of 4 classrooms at Cobbles. At Indian Landing, we all know the difficulties with traffic, both buses and vehicular and parking. It's a constricted site. There's only so much we can do, but we are proposing some improvements to the parent drop-off and the bus loop, basically coming in with a new route for the buses to drop off, line up, queue along the front of the building, and then exit, and then on the north side of the building, extending a parent drop-off loop around that side of the building and expanding the parking. You see it in plan, but there's 2 additions. One here that's 2 stories that are classroom additions, 4 classrooms, and then on the other side, expansion for the gym space.
The other thing this design takes into effect is to keep the beech tree, the large beech tree at the bus drop-off that we're all
So as we mentioned earlier, the front of the building, there's a two-story addition with 2 classrooms on either side. There's some circulation space, corridor space to get to those classrooms, stairwell for emergency egress. And again, this is on the front of the building on the landing road side. And then on the other side, we're expanding, I'm sorry, I misspoke before, we're expanding the cafeteria to accommodate the additional number of students on the far north end of the building. At Scribner, not doing much in terms of site work for the bus drop-off area. That pretty much stays the same, and the parent drop-off area kind of stays the same in here. We are expanding parking at Scribner, and again extending an emergency access road for emergency vehicles. And then in plan you can see the additions. We'll look at the building plan, but additions, classroom addition, cafeteria expansion, another small classroom expansion here, and gymnasium space.
As you're aware, we also did a large playground project this past year, so there was a lot of work done over Scribner, and everything that we've done will stay intact. We're not, everything we've done was done in mindful of that this next project may occur, so everything that's in doesn't come out. So we're preserving everything that's been done recently.
So again, excuse me, the first floor plan, we're extending another wing, if you will, with an open courtyard, but 4 classroom addition wing down the south end of the building. This is sort of the dividing line between Bay Trail and Scribner, so it's pushing out into this open court space. The yellow boxes, again, are new footprint or building addition. The blue are renovations within the existing building. So we're expanding the cafeteria out to the east side, and expanding the gym to the east side as well. We're looking at doing maybe some exterior, I'll call it a patio area, but some area outside the cafeteria for student gathering and whatnot in nice weather. As it was mentioned earlier, the buildings and grounds and transportation facilities are really constricted site, lots of buses, lots of vehicles, buildings that are too small and outdated, and not able to accommodate the growth in enrollment and the effect that that has on buses and, and transportation. Looked at many options here for a site to build a new building on, the new bus garage. We looked at the district-owned properties and realized that that Gloria Drive, there are service issues, utility issues with Gloria Drive, and there are wetland issues with Atlantic Avenue. We looked at that site first, had a wetlands engineer come out and identify the designated wetland area on that, and there really wasn't enough buildable space on that site. So the district then started looking at other available properties within the Penfield boundaries, and we've looked at a few and ultimately came up with one site that that seems to be the most ideal for accommodating a new building for the bus garage and the maintenance group. Some of you may know it as Barry's Turkey Farm. It's on Jackson Avenue or Jackson Road. It's 11 acres. There's plank road frontage. The purchase price that was negotiated with the owner is $203,500. The important thing to know is that the purchase of that land can be included and will be included in the state aid formulas, so you will get your 70% aid on that building purchase, or on that land purchase price.
The 11 acres does not represent the entire property. The entire farm represents a portion of it. Mr. Berry still retains property for that property in his ownership. That 11 acres is only a piece of it, which faces the access to it is from the lake road, as Dick mentioned.
I think there's a drawing coming up. There it is. So, excuse me, the red box identifies the 11 acres.
Am I not loud enough?
The red box identifies 11 acres. The rest of the property extends. It's much larger, but the area that the district is interested in and working with Mr. Berry on is that. So in taking that sort of aerial photograph and just sort of overlaying a footprint for the transportation building with access off of Plank Road, the new transportation center, it's bus maintenance, as well as buildings and grounds, maintenance staff, office, and then a pole barn out back, parking for buses and drivers and cars and visitors. We do need to, on a new site, we do need to take care of stormwater retention and make sure that we're not impacting the environment with additional stormwater. There's obviously going to be a lot of new pavement, impervious surface, so we're looking at incorporating some retention area for the stormwater, and then dissipate that water more regularly out into the streams and storm system.
We've also done an environmental assessment survey of the property along with the traffic impact study. Mr. Cruz will be speaking tonight about the traffic impact study results, and there were no detrimental or negative results coming out of those studies. It's a very good piece of property for the district.
So in plan, basically have four maintenance bays, 4 maintenance bus bays, a small vehicle area, toilet rooms, some parts storage, all the associated amenities and program needs associated with the bus garage. There are also toilet rooms, locker changing facilities for bus drivers, some meeting space, driver training area. And I should have started with the areas colored in blue are identified as transportation, bus garage, bus maintenance. The ones in the sort of salmon color are identified as the maintenance, buildings and grounds space.
Oh, that's the existing bus
Oh, right.
facility.
Okay. This is, sorry. So 5 Mile Line Road is out here. You can see the site. The existing bus garage is here. Existing maintenance, buildings and grounds building. There's a large pole barn. There's the fueling station down here. Our plans, and we'll show it in a second, but the plans are that we maintain all of these buildings, that the existing bus garage will get transformed somewhat. We'll talk about it in plan, but before we leave, I just want to say it again. Fueling station stays here. It's important to note that because the way the district is spread out, we want to have some buses stored at this site. We want to be able to have a bus wash bay at this site, and we want to maintain the fuel area.
And I think the district wants to maintain its ongoing relationship with Monroe County Sheriff's Department, who uses that same fueling station as well. So it's to their benefit that we keep that station there for their use as well.
So the existing bus garage right now, basically everything from this wall over is identified as continuing to be used as bus maintenance. Really, it's bus wash bay. So there would be a drive-through bus wash. You'd be able to have an automated bus wash system, so you can pull the bus in, overhead gurney sort of thing with the bus wash equipment, and they can pull out and go park. There are some toilet facilities and just small amenities for the folks that are going to be located in that building. The rest of the building is identified as district storage at this point, and there is never a lack of need for storage in a facility such as Penfield School District.
It's actually kind of exciting because we get to repurpose this facility, and one of the things that comes out of this is the proposal to relocate the network operations that is currently housed in the high school. It currently takes about 3 classrooms of space that if this project passes, we would be able to relocate Ed Turkowski and his department from those 3 classrooms at the high school and relocate them over to the existing B&G facility. And so that would become what is known as the new Network Operations Center. And then they could take deliveries of computer equipment and such instead of coming to the high school. Everything can go over there from now on. Pretty exciting idea. You're up.
Let Ed Primo speak about SEQR.
Yeah, hi, my name's Ed Primo. I'm with the law firm of Harder, Seacrest, and Emery, and we've represented the district for years with respect to the review of these projects. What school districts have to do now is they have to consider the environmental impacts of potential projects before they send them to the voters and have them approved. For many of the district's projects, and for most of this project, it's a relatively simple thing. You're dealing with existing sites and expansions of them, so there's really not many environmental impacts to look at or deal with. And the majority of this project, as you can see, is on existing sites. We do have a new site for the buildings and grounds and the new bus garage. So that is a new 11-acre site. We have a purchase option that has been negotiated with the property owner. I call it a purchase option because, of course, it's subject to, 1, completing the environmental review and being satisfied with that, and 2, voter approval of the purchase. So right now it's a negotiated, agreed to option, and we go through the process. Now the district is holding this meeting. We're not actually required to under the Environmental Quality Review Act, but we do like to give the opportunity for the public to hear about it, and hopefully if you have any comments or questions, we can raise those and the Board of Education can consider them. As has been mentioned, there's been an environmental site assessment done. It was done by an outside consulting firm. They basically walk through and look at the entire site, look at any things that they see there, look for any signs of any problems, and the report has come back indicating there's no recognized environmental conditions, which is a fancy way of saying there really isn't any problems. Dave Cruzy will be talking in a moment about the traffic study, but I think the basic conclusion is that the existing infrastructure is sufficient to handle the anticipated traffic. But we're still going through and finishing up the project. What we hope to do is come back to the Board of Education in November for a decision by them. They have to make the decision, is this a project that may have a significant impact on the environment, before they decide to send it to the voters. All the paperwork concerning that and whatever is publicly available and will be on the district website. I know we always, where's Nancy? We always promise stuff on the district website, and we'll get it on there. So to the extent that people are curious about some of the details and stuff, that's the place to go and look at it. As we indicated in the slide, once we complete the SEQR process, the board can decide to send it to the voters for approval. Once that approval happens, hopefully, then you start the process of the approval by the State Education Department. And it looks like that's just one little dash, but it's actually a very lengthy process, because that's actually when you do the full building plans and everything else. You have to submit it for code reviews and those issues. And as you'll see from the timeline later on, that takes a while. But just to talk about traffic, everybody's interested, David Cruzy from SRF Associates.
Thank you. Again, David Cruzy, SRF and Associates. We performed the traffic impact study for the new bus and transportation facility. We've been in the area for over 35 years now. We've done many of these types of studies throughout this region. We've worked with Monroe County, who is a jurisdictional, who has jurisdiction over Plank Road. So to begin the study, I'm not going to get into some of the details for you, but as was said, we looked at we studied two intersections. We studied the intersection of Plank and Jackson, as well as Plank and 250. And by Monroe County guidelines for traffic impact studies, our study area consisted of those two intersections based on projected added volumes or added traffic to outside intersections. So that's why our study intersections were limited to that two intersection study area. We looked at a period of time in the morning from 6 to 9, and in the afternoon from 1:45 to 5. And that was to ensure that we caught both the peaks of the road as well as the anticipated peaks of traffic generated by the bus and transportation facility, whether it's employees coming in and out, bus traffic coming in and out. That way we ensure that we capture all the traffic that's needed. So we take a snapshot of existing conditions, we project out the background, and ultimately full. And what we found was that there were minimal impacts, moderate impacts to the intersection of Plank and Jackson, but nothing out of the ordinary that wouldn't be out of the purview of any sort of significant adverse impacts. The impacts that are there can be accommodated by existing infrastructure. We don't recommend any infrastructure or geometric changes at the intersection of Jackson and Plank or Plank and 250. A couple other things that we looked at was sight distance at the driveway to ensure that there's adequate sight distance for vehicles coming in as well as turning out. That checked out fine. And the other thing we look at is left turn lanes. I looked at those left turn warrants. Those are nominal guidelines, and you could take a deeper look to see if those are met. Those were not met. So ultimately, and stepping back, we got all of our information from the school district. So all these numbers are based, all the future numbers are based on actual projections of both existing and future bus traffic as well as employee traffic. And ultimately, it came down to we did not see any projected adverse impacts to both the study area and the study area intersections. So if there's any questions about any of some of the details, I'll be happy to answer them.
Thank you very much. I'm Mark Sansucci. I'm Assistant Superintendent for Business. I've also been flipping around through this. So thank you for coming. I want to talk a little bit about budget, but also I feel like I have to go back and talk a little bit about some things other people talked about as well. So the existing bus garage on 5 Mile Line Road, you heard us mention, you heard Vic mention that part of the old bus garage would be converted into a bus wash facility. Why would we do that, I think is a fair question. The site on Plank Road is not on public sewer. And we, as we thought about the appropriate place for a bus wash, it seemed like public sewer is just a good idea, right? Our septic field, we'll have to have septic field service for that site. It can be smaller because we don't put that load on it. It's also a good use of that facility. I think we would also always plan on routing some buses out of that site. So right now, Barry's Turkey Farm, as you know, on Plank Road, it has good access east and west and to the south, but the high school and the high school remains on High School Drive. We'll always be routing some buses out of that area, I think. So those decisions yet to be made, but I just wanted to kind of point out that we had thought through some of that. This is the budget for the project. Right now we're at about $42.5 million. We've been aiming, and I would say tonight that we're in a range as this project goes forward of about 42 to 44 million dollars. That's about where we're going to end up. This won't be the budget probably that we end up with when we go out to the public, because we're changing things every day as we accommodate where we're at SED. We're a little behind. We scheduled this meeting, 6 months, 7, 8 months, almost a year ago, thinking we would be further along in this process. It's taken lots of turns and twists, and right now we're still at SED with review of the preliminary ideas of this project. Their review is going to drive some changes. They'll like some things, they won't like others. One of the things they have to do is approve our estimates of enrollment and growth and our capacity for buildings before they'll issue an approval. That could drive changes. So I just say that so you know this is estimated at this point, but we certainly felt like we had to tell you where we're at. So it's about 42.5 million. Construction costs for elementary schools around 14 million. We've included building condition survey work at the high school in Bay Trail, about 1.5 million plus incidental costs, so 2.3 million in total, to mostly directed at improving the building envelope. So some work around the outside of the building just to improve and maintain those buildings. Transportation facility, about $15 million, and about $1 million worth of work at the existing bus garage. So that's the construction budget. Construction contingency, just in case, change orders, things we didn't anticipate and so on, about $2 million set aside. Incidentals for fees, architects, engineering, all of that, those associated kinds of work. And DASNY fees, which is a fee we would have to pay if we bond through the dormitory authority, brings us to our total of $42 million. So that's where we're at with regard to budget. I'm going to ask Gary to speak a little bit. This is where we're at with regard to timeline. We've completed the things in blue. We're having our public information tonight, and you can see we'll work our way through. The board's going to consider comments from tonight at the October meeting through November. The board's scheduled to make a determination of significance if they're ready to at November 28th, and we're aiming for a February vote if we can. That's sort of a stake in the ground. That depends on what happens with SED, with our review, with what happens tonight. I'm going to ask Gary to talk, if he would, about where we're at with regard to design or work.
Hi. As Dr. Putnam indicated earlier, projects take a long time. We don't have the same timeline that house builders have. So this just gives some indication of what is going to take going forward. And so we have to incorporate the design time. So the architect, the engineers have to develop the documents for which SED will be doing their review, and to which also the contractors will be bidding ultimately on for the scope of work. For SED review, we're approximating what that review time may take. They have a lot of changes in personnel, but it's running a good 7 to 8 months right now review. Once they receive the drawings and specifications from the architect and engineers, then they put it into their queue and they do their review. And as I say, that right now is currently trending as 7 to 8 months. Once SED gives their blessing and issues the building permit to proceed with the work, we then go into the bid and award phase, and that will take 2.5 months to 3, and that is to put it on the street. That is for the contractors to review the bids and the drawings and specifications and submit their bids for that work. It is an open public bid. We have to give them some time to review those documents because for a project of this size, it takes some time for them to process the information. We do pre-bid walkthroughs so they understand the scope of work thoroughly, and then we would potentially start construction in December of 19. And as you can see, it's going to take a bit of time. And the other thing we have to be cognizant of all the way through this is safety to students and staff. So we have to develop a very thorough phasing plan as to how this work will be accomplished. As you saw at Scribner, we're building right next to the bus drop-off. And everywhere we're building around playgrounds. We're doing a lot of work while school's in session. So we are first and foremost, our priority is the safety of students and staff. So that construction phase has to take some time. We can't be in a rush. We have to do our due diligence, and we have to really be careful and work conscientiously to execute the work in a successful manner. So then so as Dr. Putnam had said, these things take time. So that's where we are right now within that timeline for design and all the way through to construction. I will give this to Dr. Sansucci.
Thank you. I guess I will MC questions. Or no, Tom's going to MC.
If you want to take it, I'll be Phil Donovan.
All right. So we're going to, if you want to ask a question, we welcome your question, but we are recording this so that we can put it on our web and show it on TV. So that means, uncomfortable as that is for some of us, we need to have your voice on the tape, which means you've got to talk into a microphone too. So who wants the first question? Who has?
I would share as well, I think we're going to stay after, so if people have a specific question they'd rather ask at one of the posters hanging up, one of the maps, we
if
can
you have
do
a
that too.
specific question about a specific building, that's fine. If you have a general question. Come on, I'll
right,
start talking about
no,
something and you'll hate
got
it,
one.
and then you'll, all right.
We got one. You do, oh, you don't have to stand up.
I guess my question has to do with zoning and what you guys have done to think about the possibility of zoning for the different elementary schools based on, I guess, the residents, the developments where people live, and if you could talk a little bit about that.
It's really I can start and then I'll turn to Mark, who has a history too. The reality is that Penfield hasn't rezoned. I don't think in your time, and I think it's been a long time since we've rezoned. And what that means is changing our elementary zoning. And so where you live and what elementary school that you go to. I think it's fair to say that it's a very politically charged decision. If I said to everybody here, next year you'll be going to a different elementary school, while some that might be great, others that would be a very difficult situation. We've looked at the numbers internally in terms of that doesn't solve our problem today. If we really looked and did a map with 4 new areas in what school they would go to, we would shuffle things around and we'd still have our space issue. It doesn't solve it. Now, if I had 100 students at one elementary school and 400 at the others, that would fix it, but or have a better chance of fixing our enrollments at each elementary school. But right now, the way that our district is designed, we don't really get the bang for our buck on trying to redistrict the entire catchment area for each elementary school. So I think there's a part of is we have to look at, and we have, is what really is at impact? What do we get out of it? Because we also know politically it's a pretty charged decision to have. There are some districts that they change elementary schools on an annual basis. You get a letter in the mail that says next year you're going to this elementary school, and that's just part of their history and their culture. Penfield, I think, doesn't have that typical history and culture to do. So it's something when we talk about redistricting is the term, we don't take it lightly at all because there is an impact to families. Mark, if you want to add anything to that.
I don't think I'd add anything to that. Tom looks to me just because I have the history of it. Our history around catchment areas or what elementary school you go to, zoning, I think of buildings, but around catchment areas has been that as we've changed catchment areas, the process that's been in place for Penfield to do that since I've been here, which is not that long, but it is about 22, 23 years, has been that we've designated neighborhoods as swing areas. So we said, okay, that neighborhood that you live in, new families coming in are going to go to a different school. And then because we had this commitment, we felt to existing families that they didn't have to change. So if you it's a very gentle way to change things. I mean, it's politically palatable, but boy, is it slow, right? Because we've got to wait for your kids to grow up and move out. And in terms of efficiency, I honestly resist it now because in terms of efficiency, it means I have to route 2 buses into your neighborhood. One for if you're swinging from Cobbles to Harris Hill, I've got to send a Cobbles bus in. I double my costs, right? And then the process itself takes forever. So if you're going to do it, it's the efficient way to do it is say, hey, that used to be your elementary school, and guess what? Now it's something else. And whether it's right or wrong, that hasn't been the Penfield way. The capacity question comes up a little bit because at this point we could shuffle people around, but it'd be a short-term solution. So that's right.
At Cobbles, my son goes to Cobbles Elementary School, and we have a very large first grade classroom. And I was curious if you could talk a little bit about the numbers in other schools, if we're seeing larger, younger grades, primary grades in all of our schools, and how that would impact what the state might, how the state might approve our possible, draft plan.
Right. That's we are seeing bigger, depends on the year. Last year, which are now the first graders, was big at Cobbles in particular, 100 and some odd first graders for that year in Cobbles. Now this year, the kindergarten's smaller. It came down a little bit. But what we are seeing is a return to, I think, it's hard to know, right? I mean, we're projecting, and these are all done on projections. We've projected the future need. What we know today is certainly the incoming class sizes have gotten bigger than they have been in the past, and that seems to be a trend now over the course of the last several years. And we're at, our primary grades, the kindergarten 1, 2, 3, we've got a district goal of around 22 kids per classroom. We're bumping 26 now, 25's pretty normal, and I expect it to continue to get like that. You heard Gary mention the extended time frame, right? So all of these aren't going to help first grade next year, right? That's a reality, but we expect it to continue over time. We're going to have to wrestle through those few years. I would say, though, that usually when we look at class sizes, or kindergarten's the hardest to estimate, right? We just, it's always, we estimate, we plan, we send out surveys, we ask people, we do a census, we have census data, but then who shows up is always sort of a surprise, because folks aren't, there are folks who've pre-registered their kid that they haven't had yet, and there are folks who won't think about it until they see the first yellow bus on that day of school. It's human nature. So kindergarten's hard. We do the best we can, and we track that, and we do kindergarten registration. It still changes. But then the other thing that we never know about, the other thing that happens and has changed for us is the kindergarten class size that you have isn't going to be the first grade class size you have. They usually grow, and they grow quite a bit between kindergarten and first grade. And it's parents who made the choice to hold their kid back. It's parents who wanted a half-day kindergarten program now, or a parochial school. They valued that, or I don't know all the choices, but I do know that it grows. And that year at Cobbles grew more than many years. I think so now the question will be, what happens? Does it grow to second grade? Does it grow to third grade? Probably not. Some of the drivers of what's going on in our community are, one of the things that surprised me about Windsor Ridge is that, we thought that would drive, enrollment particular to Scribner. But what's happened is a lot of those homes, and this is somewhat anecdotal, but the more I talk to people, the more I believe it to be true, a lot of those homes were bought by people who already live in the Penfield School District. And they don't necessarily want to change schools. They don't want to change even elementary school. They just want a new house. And so they move from their existing house, they buy the new house, which opens up their house somewhere else that then refills. And so it's hard to know where the kids are going to come from and where they're going to end up.
I can answer a little of that one.
Sure.
Is that we do have in Penfield what's called voluntary transfer. And so a family can voluntary transfer their student to another elementary school, they have to pick up all transportation. We don't send a bus to your new house to pick up. That's overseen by our assistant superintendent, Jim Pfeiffer, and they have to get approved. We've looked at that because that's a great question that comes up from parents and staff, which is we'll just send everybody back to their home elementary school and it'll solve the problem. When we review those numbers, if we do that, it doesn't fix the problem because the 5 kids that are in the Harris Hill, I'm making this number up, but the 5 kids who are at the Harris Hill who go to Cobbles, they go back to Harris Hill, and then 5 kids at Harris Hill who really are in Cobbles go back to Cobbles, and all of a sudden we're in the same spot. We've just moved kids around, and it's still the same or very close numbers. What we are doing, though, is reviewing. So I would say, without a certainty, if this year somebody wanted to do a voluntary transfer to first grade at Cobbles, we would say no. We look at those numbers, and Jim's office does a great job making sure that we don't agree to a voluntary transfer if that class size is beyond what we want it to be. And what we're really getting into is we typically haven't denied many families, but we're having more and more conversations that we're at a point where we can't always say yes because the class sizes are starting to creep up. And to answer the question too, is there are classes all around. So I shared in the beginning, I'm a Cobbles parent, so I get it, and I understand the first grade at Cobbles. So we have similar class sizes in all of our buildings that are at 25, 24, 26 is high, but the other ones are right nearby across the district in multiple grade levels. So we do have 4 elementary schools. Anything we do for one, I am consistent and fair, so we have to look at everybody, and that argument is, well, 25 is close to 26. So I want to be fair that we don't know what next year will look like in second grade at Cobbles or any of the other grades that are a little higher. In January, as Mark alluded to, that's when kindergarten registration is. That's when we get our first shot of what kindergarten will look like the following year. And in January, we start reviewing those numbers and all the other class size numbers for new kids maybe moving in and students who have already said they're moving out. And we start reviewing those with principals and at district office and with the board really from January all the way through the summer. And we do have to have sort of this drop dead date on when we're deciding not to add a new section. Cobbles is probably the most unique, as Indian Landing, is that there's not an empty classroom sitting dormant waiting for a teacher in a new section. It will involve changes. Cobbles, everybody at Cobbles knows, is we got rid of the computer lab. There is no hardwired computer lab at Cobbles, which every other elementary school has one, and it's because we turned it back into a classroom. And so there are other things we're going to have to look at. Tonight, we're not ready to really talk about what that will look like. I can just guarantee you that we are continuing to talk with it very closely with the building principals who are being impacted and doing everything we can to support those students as we move through this process.
When you look at the construction phase, is the duration for construction at each specific school like that 3.5 years, or is that like a year at Indian Landing, a year at Cobbles, a year at Scribner?
That's a really good question. It's more of a Gary question, but can I step on your line? So it's going to depend because we are not at phasing yet. I mean, we haven't phased this yet. And I think what Gary would tell you, and I had to step out for a second, but these are going to be difficult to build. So, we can't do it in the summer. We just can't. Summer's too short, especially for additions. And some of the buildings, like look at Scribner, it's right on the bus loop. It's right next to Bay Trail. It's going to be tricky construction. So I think that 3 years will be split up between the buildings, but I think that at each of those sites during the period of time, there'll be construction going on at all of those buildings. I think it's going to be slow because of the nature of what we're trying to do. Indian Landing's not much better if you think about none of them are good. Yeah. I'm just going through them in my head thinking, well, what's the easy add? Cobbles is in many ways the most straightforward of the buildings, but even that has its challenges. Yes.
I'm sorry, I'm getting that. No, it's all right. I did a bad job at my Phil Donahue, so thank you.
I'm wondering if there will be a traffic light put in at Jackson and Plank. That's my first question.
At this stage, even with that, Monroe County has
think, I'm going to ask you to,
So that's something that we could certainly take a look at further. We'd have to go through some warrants for it. There's 9 separate warrants. And then we can get into further investigations of it. But at this stage, based on capacity, based on volumes, there's no apparent and compelling reasons to signalize it, particularly as a result of this project. So that's long.
Part
that's
of
the
my
short answer.
reason for asking is I go to work at the corner of Wayland and 5 Mile Line, and I see the traffic on 5 Mile Line. You can't get down 5 Mile Line when the kids are going to high school. The buses are just jammed. So I'm picturing that happening right around the corner from my house. And without a traffic light, I don't know how it can happen. And a turn lane added. I just am wondering about that.
Those are some significant modifications that it gets outside of even maybe what this project is trying to do. That's something that certainly Monroe County could take a look at. At this stage, we don't see a nominal reason for it. You could look at it more substantively, see what other factors may be involved. But you speak to 5 Mile Line and Wayland. A lot of these conditions, and living in this area, a lot of these conditions, especially during that peak school traffic, the arrival traffic, it is a surge. It's a 20, 25 minute maybe surge. But then at all other hours of the day, traffic is usually steady. And we don't want to design our roadways to accommodate all traffic at maybe the 1 hour of all of the day of all the year. You typically design back a little further, maybe like the 30th highest hour, not the first highest hour. Otherwise, you'd have a roadway system overbuilt for everything. So it's just making modest improvements where we can, but outside of this study, that's not what we've seen.
Okay, that makes sense. Can I ask one more question?
Sure.
I'm just wondering how $42 million will materialize. 'Cause every year our school taxes have gone up.
Right. So that's.
Can I afford to live in Penfield?
So I had hoped I wanted to be a lot more in depth of that tonight, but unfortunately, some of those decisions of aidability and so on that drive the aid of this are in SED's hands right now. And one of the things I really didn't want to do was do a presentation that was particularly about a topic like that was going to be wrong. You know what I mean? So, that I knew was going to be wrong probably by tomorrow. Our goal with this project is right now in terms of we get state aid. We get state aid back on our building projects. And we have a long history of doing building projects smaller than this. We've done very few big projects in my history, but we almost always do a little one. And we almost always have used cash through the years. SED aids those building projects. Even if we use cash, they sort of pretend we borrow it, and so they pay it back to us with interest over time, over 15 years. And so our stream of all the history of all the projects in Penfield has resulted in a condition where our debt service, the money that we owe, our mortgage payment, if you will, is about $4 million a year. Our state aid that we receive on building projects and on all our debt service is about 5.5 million. We're positive in that flow every year by about $1.5 million. So essentially that $1.5 million comes in as state aid and it's supporting other things in the budget. But we want to make sure that continues. We want it to be stable, right? Stability, no spikes, no fall-offs. We know we need to maintain our buildings. But it's important to us that be steady across time. And so part of what we're designing, Mr. Bastian is here tonight from Bernie Donegan. He's not presenting, but just to hear the conversation, is that continue. So we've got capital reserves, cash set aside. So we have about $17 million set aside towards this project. We'll need to issue bonds for the rest of it. They'll aid the bonds, they'll aid the cash. Our goal in this is to structure it so that we don't spike or change that flow of funds to the district. That's important to me. In fact, as we're working through this project, I'm still at the point where it'll change if it has to, because we need to make sure that that happens. So if, this is, it's a hard thing about classrooms. They're not going to aid the classrooms. It's too much. In their estimate, they don't think that's going to work. Well, that changes my math, right? And if that changes my math, we're going to have to change the project because it needs to fit within our budget. We need to be able to provide that stability. As it runs out $1.5 million in our budget, that's what we need. That's what we want to continue. So we're in a sort of because of our history, we're in sort of this, and the rules have changed throughout the course of time. But so we're in the history of us as we've used cash, and that's where we end up. There are some districts that have always had a burden. They've sort of issued bonds. They're negative, or they have a different set of choices that they have to make. But for us, we want to ensure that stability. We want to design our bond issue. We want to design our aidability. We want to design our project so it does what we need, but it has to serve multiple masters, right? The buildings have to be right. We have to do the right thing for the kids. All that's fine, but it's got to work financially, and it's got to work towards that $1.5 million of positive cash flow.
Thank you.
I had one other, I'm sorry, yes. Then I wanted to give Gina a chance because I saw her, tonight Gina Chope is here, who routes buses out of 5 Mile Line Road every day, so I thought maybe she should have a chance to talk a little bit about what that looks like. But why don't you ask your question first, and then we'll look back around.
I probably have 2 or 3, but
Okay.
since we're talking about money, I was wondering if you could comment on the increase in operating costs by moving the bus garages out to very much the north end of the district, so the buses are really going to have a lot longer travel routes on average?
We've not completely rerouted our district yet. I mean, to try and figure out how that is going to work. That property is on the northern end of the northern edge of the district, right? So from there we'll go east, west, and south. Right now, we'll still route some buses out of the high school. I think that I mentioned that before. We'll still route some buses out of 5 Mile Line Road. So we're going to need to figure out how that's going to work. But actually, right now, when you think about it, we leave 5 Mile Line Road and we go north, we go east, west, and south. So I don't think that we're going to see a dramatic change in costs as a result of that. I think by the time we're done, it's going to work out about the same. What you need to worry about, obviously, is the deadhead mileage. The bus is empty and running, and I don't see that. I think by the time we get done with sort of good, thorough routing, that will be very similar. I'm not anticipating an issue with that. You had another question, though.
Yes. Since I live in the neighborhood, there's a town drainage ditch that crosses Plank, and I think it goes right through this property, so I'm wondering how that water is going to be diverted and how that's going to be handled.
Could we, for that question, hold off, and then I can have Alan right back at the map and talk through that? That might be easier, because it's very specific to your neighbor. Is that okay? All right. And then same, I think I saw a hand over here too. I know you wanted Gina to talk, but I know this gentleman who's been raising his hand for quite some time.
I see $15 million for elementary schools. Do you have a breakdown at what money is going to what school?
Oh, sure. I don't know it off the
haven't
top
seen
of my
that
head, but we rolled them together just for summary sake on the slide, but I'm happy to provide that to you afterwards. We know. It's about $4 million each. It's about equivalent.
Sure, we can. Once we have those numbers more broken out, we can put that on the district website. There's a web page with all the updated information on the capital project. This PowerPoint will be up on that link as well. So it's all there on the district website.
Does that money roll over? Like you use, say you only need $3 million at Cobbles, you take an extra $1 million and use it over at Scribner.
Yeah, this is a budget, right? So, we need the way it works essentially is that the is that we have to live within that budget. So the voters will authorize $42 million, 500. A budget's a plan, a budget's an estimate. And the one thing that we haven't talked about it, or Gary probably mentioned, is the whole bidding phase. So this is based on bidding of a project that's well into the future. So things could change. If we had costs come in significantly higher at Cobbles, and then we would need to be able to fund that, or we would have to change what we do. The thing that I would say about that, though, so it's a plan, it's a projection. It won't turn out exactly this way. We have to live within the dollar amount that we have. What's important, I think, is always that we don't. If we came in well under budget, what are we going to do then? Or will we build something extra? Or would we significantly do something different? No, we make a commitment to our public that this is what we're going to build. We're going to try and stick to that commitment as close as we can. So we've got a plan. We're going to fund that plan, and we're going to try and live by that plan. There have been times when we've had to change. We at one time some years ago when we issued bids for the high school project came in. Well, nobody could have ever projected, I think it was the Gulf War, and costs shot way up, and we had to go back and redesign and amend that project and change things to be able to come in under the budget. But we tried to stay true to the spirit of what it was that we had promised. Does that make sense? Gina had... Oops,
I have one question here, and then I'll bring it over to Gina.
So with these numbers showing all what we need for the elementary schools, the middle school and the high school, do they show any problems with accommodating all these extra students?
No, we should be okay with capacity at the high school and with Bay Trail. We had additions at both of those buildings some years ago. When we look out into the future, we believe that we've got adequate capacity for them through the foreseeable future. So I think we're good for that. So Gina, just a few words about routing of buses and about the site on both sites really.
Right. I just wanted to address the question you had about I sit in that Wayland and 5 Mile Line Road every morning trying to get into work myself, and I play with the times that I leave my house thinking it's going to make it better, but it doesn't. But what you have to understand is it's not the buses that's jamming that up. It's all the cars, the parent cars, the student drivers. That's what's jamming it up. You won't have that on Jackson and Plank Road area. It's going to be just the buses. You're not going to have all the kids going into a school over there because there is no school. And so that you're not going to see the same thing that you see right now on 5 Mile Line because it's just buses coming out of Plank Road. There's no traffic as far as the kids and the parents dropping off. So it will be way better than 5 Mile Line is for sure. And as far as the operational additional costs being located in the north end, right now, being over here on 5 Mile Line, we go all the way out to Gananda with our buses and bring them all the way back to 5 Mile every day. So actually, we'll be saving on that end of it. What we might lose going the other way, we're going to pick it up on the other side. So I do believe it is going to end up being pretty much a wash as far as that goes. We will try to, we are going to try to put some buses, keep them at the old site. They may service the Indian Landing area because it is closer this way. We haven't actually sat down and figured all that out yet. Again, it all depends on the routing. But we will utilize that place. We're thinking about putting some of the sports buses over there that will be coming into the high school for athletic trips. On the weekends, we can have the trip buses there so that they're not coming from Plank Road. They'll just be right across the street. No traffic to deal with on the weekends, getting into here to get athletics. So, that's all I had to say.
Thank you.
Yep, no problem.
I think just sort of in the interest of time, we've been talking at you and some Q&A for a little over an hour. What I'd like to do is we're done with our presentation portion and some of the larger Q&A, but we've got building principals here, we've got lots of staff and all of our wonderful team here. If you have questions about specific sites, we're happy to stay as long as you need and answer any of those questions. Sound good?
And thank you for coming out.
There is, yep.
Somebody should say thank you. You know, we invited you.
Yeah, thank you for being here.
Yeah.
So we never know with these events, it's always a little fun on how many people will get to turn out. So it's always, do we have enough chairs? Is everything okay? But we really appreciate you coming out. We know that a lot of people care about this. if you can go back, especially the parents involved with PTA and community members, please make sure you go back. Everything is on the webpage. We've been talking about this and will be talking about this at every board meeting, I'm sure, for the foreseeable future. We're always available for questions, and we don't mind it. So if there's a question you have around facilities, you can email Alan McNiff or Mark Sansucci or myself. If you go to the webpage, if you don't know who to email, you go to the webpage and just hit that little on the bottom. It's the Contact Us link. All of that goes directly to Nancy Bradstreet, and then she sends it to whoever needs to answer it. So we're here for you all the time to answer any questions you have. Please don't hesitate, and please share that with other people. Again, thank you very much for being here, and we'll be here if you have any specific questions. The webpage is www.penfield.edu. Yep.